Extinction didn't erase their terror. In fact, it sealed their legacy in blood and bone. For over 600 million years, our Earth was a proving ground for predators. Nature constantly the rules of survival. It's fascinating to consider creatures so specialized, so perfectly adapted to hunting, that they seem almost mythical. I recall the first time I saw a Smilodon fossil. What struck me most was how paleontologists initially misidentified the remains. Based on some isolated cheek teeth, they thought it was a type of hyena, which they named Hyena neogaea. It just goes to show how challenging it can be to piece together the lives of extinct creatures from limited evidence. It wasn't long, though, before a wave of new fossils emerged, offering a more complete picture. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which seemed almost comically oversized. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of felid, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. And so, Smilodon Populator was born. Smilodon, meaning knife tooth, and Populator roughly translating to the destroyer, or he who brings devastation. It's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. The quest to unravel the Smilodon's family tree continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct subfamily Machirodontinae. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers, though saber-toothed cats is more accurate since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers, or any living cats for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the Felinae subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Machirodontinae, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodontini, or as some paleontologists like to call them, the dirk-toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodontini lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power, thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio, with 3 distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table. S. Gracilis, S. Fatalis, and S. Populator. While you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch, they did have their differences. First up, we have S. Gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Meganterian. Next came S. Fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly 1 million years later. Last, but certainly not least, S. Populator made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after Fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. Gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern jaguar. S. Fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching an African lion in size, but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos or 620 pounds of prehistoric fury. That's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today. But S. Populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of felid physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos, or 1,040 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that regardless of whether you were facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, you were in equal danger. I sometimes think about the Ice Age and the creatures that roamed the earth then. It's easy to think that being big is enough, but the Smilodon, that prehistoric saber-toothed cat, was more than just large. It was built like a tank, a marvel of natural engineering. Its heel bone, robust and elongated, hints at an agility we might not expect. Some paleontologists even speculate that these cats could have outleaped modern lions, which can clear heights of 15 feet. Imagine a cat the size of a bear leaping over a one-story building. But it wasn't just its fancy footwork. Its forelimbs were approximately 20% thicker than what you'd expect for a cat of its size, giving it incredible strength, surpassing even the larger American lion. And at the end of those muscular arms, it was armed with fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved. These claws were proportionally enormous, even for a cat of Smilodon size, twice the size of a Siberian tiger's and even longer than those of a Kodiak brown bear. They weren't just weapons. They were nature's grappling hooks, perfect for latching onto large prey. Of course, when we think of Smilodon, it's those iconic, impossibly long canines that capture our imaginations. Saber-teeth weren't unique to Smilodon. Nature has experimented with this dental design in various mammals, but Smilodon perfected it. What made its fangs special was their audacious length. We're talking about canines so long they protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature that was uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. To put it in perspective, Smilodon's canines could grow up to 8 inches long, longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were precision instruments of prehistoric destruction, shaped like deadly daggers, with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides designed to pierce deep into flesh with devastating efficiency. Here's where it gets interesting. You'd expect a predator with teeth like that to have a powerful bite to match. But surprisingly, studies have shown that Smilodon's bite was relatively weak, about 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So, how did it kill? That's been a subject of much debate. One theory suggests that Smilodon was the original ambush predator. Picture this: a Smilodon hidden in dense vegetation, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a powerful leap, it pounces on its unsuspecting prey, using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws to pin down its victim. With precision, it sinks its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. But not everyone agrees with this gut-stabbing hypothesis. Many researchers favor a different scenario, that Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey, then delivered a precise, lethal bite to the throat, causing severe blood loss and suffocation. A quick, if not particularly pleasant end for its unfortunate victims. Adding fuel to this theory is the discovery that Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees. With a gape like that, pretty much every neck in the Ice Age would have been fair game. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans suggest that these prehistoric predators had excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if all that wasn't enough, they were fast too. Many Smilodon fossils showed trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions. This suggests that not only were they quick on their feet, but they were also willing to risk a bruised chest in pursuit of their next meal. Smilodon's unique traits, along with its powerful weaponry, made it a versatile hunter, capable of taking down a wide variety of megafaunal prey. The specific animals it targeted varied based on the region it called home. In North America, their prey included oversized versions of animals we recognize today, giant bison, camels, and, if the opportunity arose, even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. Yes, these cats were taking down creatures that dwarfed modern elephants. In South America, Smilodon's targets were equally impressive and diverse, including creatures like Toxodon, Leptopterna, various species of Glyptodon, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests that Smilodon occasionally went after caimans, cementing its status as a top predator. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence such as tooth marks on bones, or Smilodon remains found alongside those of their prey, providing vital clues about its diet. One big question that's still hotly debated in paleontology circles is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. This isn't just academic curiosity. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodons lived socially comes from the La Brea tar pits in California. These California tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. The La Brea tar pits. I've spent hours imagining the scene there, animals blundering into sticky asphalt, desperately struggling to escape, only to become entombed. But it wasn't just the herbivores that met their end in those pits. Predators, too, became trapped, often while trying to feast on the already ensnared. Smilodon fossils are incredibly common finds in these pits. Over 166,000 bones have been attributed to them. This astonishing number has led some to wonder if Smilodon might have been a social animal. The reasoning is fascinating. In modern cat species, the more social ones tend to respond more readily to distress calls. So, if one Smilodon became stuck, it might have cried out for help, inadvertently luring other members of its group into the same sticky trap. A grim image, certainly, but one that could explain the concentration of remains. Another clue hinting at Smilodon's possible social behavior is, surprisingly, quite touching, even with that prehistoric edge. Some Smilodon fossils bear signs of severe injuries or disabilities that would have made hunting nearly impossible. Yet, these individuals survived well into adulthood. This has led some paleontologists to propose a sort of pseudo-healthcare among Smilodons. The idea is that these injured cats were cared for by their fellow Smilodons, much like modern lions or wolves support injured members of their pride or pack. One famous example is a Smilodon fossil showing signs of hip dysplasia from a young age, yet it lived to adulthood. It's hard to imagine how such an animal could have hunted successfully alone, leading to the heartwarming, if speculative, image of Smilodon families looking after their own. Not everyone buys the Smilodon social club theory, though. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside of predator traps like La Brea tend to be more isolated. They argue that this suggests a more solitary lifestyle, more like many modern big cats. Regardless of whether Smilodon was a team player or a loner, one thing's undeniable. It was at the top of the food chain. But that doesn't mean it didn't face competition. The Ice Age was a time of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with an appetite for mammoth-sized meals. Two of Smilodon's biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, while real dire wolves were impressive, they weren't quite as monstrous as their fictional counterparts in popular series. But they were formidable predators in their own right, and isotope analysis shows they had a diet very similar to Smilodon's. In other words, these predators often competed for the same prey. So, how did Smilodon stack up against its competitors? Well, when it came to the American lion, it was probably a bit of a standoff. The American lion had size on its side, being one of the largest cats to ever exist. But Smilodon had those impressive canines, which likely served as a pretty effective deterrent. Most likely, these two apex predators tried to avoid each other when possible. But when conflicts did occur, it could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often come out second best in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from La Brea suggests that dire wolves would frequently abandon their kills when a Smilodon showed up. It's not hard to imagine why, given those sabers on full display at all times, most predators would probably decide that discretion was the better part of valor. But lions and wolves weren't the only competition Smilodon had to worry about. The Ice Age was also the time of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small by comparison. Some of these bears reached truly dinosaurian proportions. However, these ursine giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary creatures. So, if a group of Smilodons encountered one, the bear would likely have decided that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. Now, we've talked a lot about Smilodon's impressive hunting adaptations, but there's one question we haven't addressed yet. How on earth did it eat with those ridiculous teeth? After all, those saber-like fangs seem like they would have been quite the obstacle during feeding. Well, Smilodon had a solution for that, too. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, Smilodon was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, situated on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, Smilodon would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks of meat, while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this eating style sounds familiar, that's because you might have seen it in action. Many modern cats, and even other predators, use a similar technique when tackling tough pieces of meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem-solving. When life gives you saber teeth, you adapt your eating style accordingly. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire for itself. Between its three species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator green with envy. In North America, S. gracilis and S. fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. fatalis and S. populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread, it was also adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed Smilodon to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears, proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodons, the rhino-like toxodon, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like 25,000 years ago to be one of our earliest ancestors, armed with nothing but primitive tools, coming face to face with a Smilodon, a saber-toothed cat. The relationship between humans and Smilodon was likely tense. We were competing for the same food sources, and by the time humans arrived, only the larger Populator and Fatalis remained. Bad timing indeed. Given that Meganterion, a possible predecessor of Smilodon, occasionally preyed on Homo erectus, it's not a stretch to imagine that Smilodon considered early humans as potential prey, too. But humans are resourceful. While there's no direct evidence yet of human-Smilodon confrontations, our superior technology and group tactics likely allowed us to turn the tables. In 2021, researchers discovered a petroglyph that seems to depict a group of humans observing a Smilodon from afar. It's a tantalizing glimpse into a world where our ancestors shared the landscape with these magnificent and terrifying creatures. But this coexistence wasn't to last. Somewhere between then and now, Smilodon disappeared. The youngest remains of both S. fatalis and S. populator date back to around 10,000 years ago, roughly the same time that humans in some parts of the world were figuring out agriculture. The extinction of Smilodon continues to fuel debate among paleontologists. Some argue that humans played a role in their demise, either through direct competition or by altering habitats. Others are less convinced. The more widely accepted theory points to the broader Quaternary extinction event as the primary culprit. This was a period of climate change that saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on for food began to die out, the saber-toothed predator found itself in an increasingly precarious position. In a cruel twist of fate, the very adaptations that had made Smilodon such a successful hunter of large prey now became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, Smilodon struggled to adapt to a world where those giants were disappearing. It was too good at what it did, and when the world changed, it couldn't change with it. The extinction of Smilodon marked not just the end of a species, but the end of an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years came to an end. Its legacy resonates in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. Mammoths were icons of the Ice Age, towering 11 feet tall and weighing 6 tons. But they weren't the scariest things out there, not even close. Lurking in the same frozen wastelands was a creature that made mammoths look quaint. A beast so massive, so brutally engineered, it was less an animal and more a biological battering ram. Imagine the size of a mammoth, but fused with the destructive force of a medieval war machine. This was no gentle giant. It didn't need curved tusks or a coat to command respect. All it needed, was a single monstrous weapon, one so lethal, so precise, that every encounter became a high-stakes gamble with survival. This was the true juggernaut of the Ice Age, Elasmotherium sibericum, the creature that should have defined Ice Age dominance from the very beginning. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't intimidating enough. Now multiply that by roughly 3. Add the bulk of a small elephant and crown it with a single horn so massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than the reality of an Elasmotherium. This wasn't just large, it was monumentally, almost absurdly, oversized, standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail. Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns, plural, like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single, massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. 6 feet of solid pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks, designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. The horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for Ice Age life. The Elasmarium. It wasn't just surviving the Ice Age, it was built for it. Where mammoths were oversized elephants struggling in the frozen conditions, this creature was purpose-built for the harsh realities. I find myself particularly impressed by its legs. Unlike the mammoth's thick, pillar-like limbs, better for slow movement, the Elasmotherium possessed legs that were both powerful and surprisingly agile. They weren't just weight-bearing. They were the foundation of a charging mechanism that could accelerate 5 tons of muscle and bone into a thundering full-speed charge capable of flattening anything in its path. Mammoths carried their weight evenly, but this creature's mass was front-loaded, designed to turn every charge into a catastrophic collision. Millions of years of brutal efficiency honed into one purpose: impact. The shoulder muscles alone were powerful enough to absorb the shock of high-speed collisions that would have shattered the bones of lesser creatures. And perhaps most critically, it had solved the fundamental problem that plagued many Ice Age giants: energy efficiency. While mammoths required vast quantities of vegetation, its digestive system was optimized for extracting maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses and tough vegetation. This wasn't just survival, it was thriving in conditions that left other megafauna struggling. Its skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to creatures with more delicate cranial architecture. This wasn't just about protection, it was about turning the entire head into a weapon system. When it charged, it wasn't just the horn that posed a threat, it was the entire front end functioning as an organic siege engine. Compare this to the mammoth's approach, which relied on group protection and intimidation through size. This creature needed no such social strategies. It was a solitary predator's nightmare and a territorial competitor's worst enemy, capable of defending resources through sheer individual dominance. While mammoths huddled together for warmth, it stood alone because nothing on the frozen landscape posed a credible threat. And then there's the horn, that magnificent, terrifying horn, up to 6 feet in length and potentially weighing as much as 100 pounds. Not a decorative piece, but a weapon that could punch through ice, tree trunks, and anything else unfortunate enough to challenge its owner. It's a horn longer than a standard parking space is wide, attached to a creature that could wield it with the precision of a medieval knight and the force of a freight train. The positioning was crucial. Unlike modern rhinoceroses, which carry their horns on their snouts, this creature's horn was mounted directly on the forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. This meant that when the creature lowered its head to charge, the horn became the leading edge of a 5-ton projectile moving at 25 mph. The physics alone are frightening. But the horn wasn't just a weapon. Analysis suggests it served multiple functions that gave it distinct advantages. The base was broad and sturdy enough to serve as a snowplow, allowing the creature to clear feeding areas inaccessible to other herbivores. In a world where food was scarce, this ability to access buried vegetation was a matter of life and death. The horned surface was likely covered in keratin, the same material as our fingernails, but structured for maximum durability. This covering would have been constantly growing and self-sharpening, ensuring that the weapon remained effective throughout the creature's lifetime. Unlike antlers that shed annually, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool. Recent fossil evidence suggests the horn may have been even more formidable than previously imagined. Some specimens show evidence of horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long. An 8-foot horn on a 5-ton creature represents a level of natural weaponry that has no modern equivalent. Imagine being a saber-toothed cat or cave bear, creatures accustomed to being apex predators, suddenly encountering something that could impale you from 8 feet away. The horn didn't just change how it fought, it changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live. Constantly aware that somewhere in the frozen wilderness there was a creature carrying a weapon that could end any confrontation before it truly began. This is why the mammoth's tusks, impressive as they were, pale in comparison. Tusks were tools useful for digging, displaying, and occasional defense. But this creature's horn was something else entirely. Domination made manifest. A weapon so effective that it redefined the very concept of herbivore. While mammoths were busy adapting to environments that barely tolerated their presence, this creature had claimed territories that actively welcomed their dominance. The key difference wasn't just what they could survive, it was what they could control. The Eurasian steppe during that time seemed designed specifically for creatures like it. Vast open grasslands stretched for thousands of miles. Imagine a creature so dominant, so perfectly adapted to the Ice Age that it seemed virtually indestructible. That's Elasmotherium. Yet, this giant vanished, leaving paleontologists with a perplexing mystery. How do you eliminate something that appeared to be the ultimate survivor? Elasmotherium thrived in a world of occasional river valleys and scattered woodlands. For a creature built like a living battering ram, this was paradise. No dense forests to navigate, no steep terrain to negotiate, just endless expanses of territory where speed, power, and intimidation ruled supreme. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the wind-swept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia, these were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds. Territories where the combination of extreme cold, sparse vegetation and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. Their secret lay in resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas to support their numbers, moving constantly to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle entirely. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon. It was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. This gave them significant advantages during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, constantly searching for new feeding grounds while burning precious calories. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that other creatures couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas that others couldn't claim, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. And unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck, but the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, With some populations persisting on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived? Some researchers suggest human hunting prey, but again, the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-foot horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. Perhaps the most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear. It collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet, it vanished with barely a trace. For an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, the silence surrounding its extinction is genuinely haunting. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted. Perhaps they were just luckier. Elasmotherium. It wasn't just another Ice Age animal. It was, perhaps, the pinnacle of prehistoric power. I find myself thinking about this creature often, so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined dominance. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether. bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When I envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dinopithecus inans, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters, around 5 feet tall when upright, and weighing up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet, despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Papionini, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabes. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus inans based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein, near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great, Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and inans, meaning huge, in Latin. A fitting title, I think, for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pliocene epoch alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone measured up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight, literally. Though fossilized postcranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a four-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals, while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened, and Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I often wonder what it must have been like to face down a Dinopithecus, not just one, but a whole troop of them. Imagine a defensive circle of perhaps 10 to 20 of these massive primates, all muscle and rage, bristling, ready to defend their territory. It would have been a serious deterrent, even to large carnivores. Certainly not a creature that backed down easily. It simply didn't need to. During the time when Dinopithecus thrived, South Africa was undergoing dramatic climatic shifts. For a primate of such exceptional size, these changes presented both challenges and opportunities. The forests were gradually giving way to more open woodlands and grasslands, a transition that favored adaptable, ground-dwelling species. Fossil sites where Dinopithecus remains have been discovered suggest it inhabited a mosaic landscape. Open savanna interspersed with woodlands and riverine forests, environments not unlike those preferred by modern baboons. Troop life for Dinopithecus likely mirrored that of modern baboons, but on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies, with adult males asserting their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. Some of these males weighed up to 150 kilograms. These clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and a great deal of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilograms of plant matter daily. Grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. And while plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented their diet with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, scavenged carcasses. But here's the twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope, or the young of larger prey animals, weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their sheer bulk may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papionins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. Upright walking had become well established, brain sizes were growing, and the first stone tools were appearing. This was the crucible of humanity, and Dinopithecus was there to witness it. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in close association with hominin remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Koopa's Cave in South Africa's cradle of humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilograms. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilograms, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilograms. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous, with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources, fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have end regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, the extinction of Dinopithecus, that massive monkey, is a story that stays with me. It's a reminder that even the most formidable creatures can fall victim to the relentless press of a changing world. I imagine the early hominins, our ancestors, watching those giants, perhaps even learning from them. Maybe their sheer size offered a degree of protection, a deterrent to predators who wouldn't risk tangling with a troop of large, aggressive Dinopithecus males. Or maybe a small group of early humans attracted predators, inadvertently putting the Dinopithecus at risk. Around 1.6 to 1.8 million years ago, Dinopithecus vanished. Climate change was likely the main culprit. As grasslands expanded and woodlands shrank, their food became scarce, and their shelter disappeared. Smaller, more adaptable baboons also presented fierce competition, especially as the environment began to favor generalists. Then came Homo erectus, with their advanced tools, broader diets, and overlapping ecological needs. Resource competition intensified. Predation dynamics shifted too, with new carnivores posing increased risks, especially to the young ones. And while it's harder to confirm, disease might have played a role. It's a cruel irony that the very traits that once made Dinopithecus successful, their large size, slow reproduction, and specialized diet, ultimately led to their downfall. It echoes a trend, really, of large-bodied species disappearing gradually under mounting preyers. And now, let's travel to ancient Greece, where another formidable creature roamed. They called it Anosian Dirus, the terrible wolf. So dominant, so ferocious, that even the largest prehistoric animals trembled at its approach. With jaws that could tear through the flesh and bones of a mammoth, it was the dire wolf. Apex predators, renowned for their meat-centric diet and intimidating hunting skills. Their teeth, with those distinct posterior cuspids and transverse crests, set them apart. And their digestive systems, those short intestines, were perfectly tailored for processing meat. Their robust skeletons, powerful limbs, and broad chests spoke of strength and hunting prowess. And their bite force, among the strongest of any canid, capable of taking down formidable prey. These dire wolves prowled across diverse landscapes, from the plains of North America to the arid savannas of South America, even the steppes of eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison antiquus, Pleistocene horses like Equus scotti, and giant ground sloths such as Megalonyx. Down in South America, they feasted on large ground sloths, glyptodons, toxodons, mastodons, and extinct camelids like Hemiokinia. And in eastern Asia, they faced mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, steppe bison, and wild horses. They faced competition from other predators too: Xenocyon, Smilodon, the American lion, and the giant short-faced bear. At La Brea, they clashed with predators and scavengers amidst the trapped herbivores, outnumbering gray wolves 5-1. Living in monogamous pairs and hunting in packs, they displayed fierce determination and adaptability. Their hunting strategies, tooth breakage rates, and pack dynamics offer insights into their evolutionary success and survival instincts. They were truly versatile, thriving in diverse environments. The dire wolf stood as the ultimate ruler of the food chain. The origin of the dire wolf has been a source of debate. One theory suggests they descended from a Eurasian expansion of the genus Canis. Another proposes an ancestral lineage native to the Americas. In 1992, scientists tried to extract mitochondrial DNA from the skeletal remains of Anosian dirus gilda, a close relative of modern wolves, but tar residue from the La Brea pits thwarted their efforts. Finally, in 2021, scientists obtained nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils. The discoveries revealed that dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines about 5.7 million years ago, supporting the theory of an ancestral lineage native to the Americas. So, while dire wolves and gray wolves may share similar skeletal structures, they are not closely related. This is convergent evolution, where different species independently develop similar traits. The dire wolf stands as a truly unique species within the canine world. The story of the dire wolf spans an impressive 40 million years. It all began with the arrival of the canid family in North America. I find it fascinating how the diverse branches of this family tree, from fox-like Vulpina to dog-like Canini, showcase such intriguing variations. Dire wolf fossils have been discovered in diverse habitats across North and South America, including plains, grasslands, forested mountain areas, and arid savannas. The most fossil-abundant areas are the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and the Tule Springs fossil beds in Nevada. While dire wolf remains are less common at high latitudes in North America, recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils challenge previous theories about their range. Fossils have been reported in various states in the United States, with major sites located east of the Rocky Mountains. Dire wolf fossils have also been uncovered in various locations across Mexico, particularly in the San Josecito Cave and El Cedazo. And they've been found in South America, with specimens dated to less than 17,000 years ago in countries including Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. The discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China in 2020 suggests a migration route from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia. This really challenges the assumptions that we had about barriers to their dispersal. Understanding the physical characteristics of dire wolves sheds light on their remarkable adaptations and behaviors. The dire wolf, similar in proportions to modern North American wolves like the Yukon wolf and northwestern wolf, exhibited variations in size and morphology. While some dire wolf specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than the largest northern wolves today, others were larger. The dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head compared to modern wolves of similar body size, with a massive skull characterized by broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences in dire wolves were observed, with specimens from California and Mexico showing distinct craniodental features and limb proportions compared to those from east of the Continental Divide. Isotope analysis revealed shorter and lighter limbs, making it less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while others possessed longer limbs comparable to the Yukon wolf. 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today in the Sangamonian interglacial period. The Wisconsin glacial period followed, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, also known as the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of North America. Dire wolves went extinct 9,500 years ago, marking the end of a unique era. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes, without genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction remain debated, likely involving factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. The disappearance of dire wolves marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family and potentially altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 years ago and 9,500 years ago, significant climatic shifts occurred, shaping the environment in which dire wolves lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced their survival. Dire wolves existed in diverse habitats ranging from grasslands to forests, adapting to various environmental conditions. As apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems, impacting the populations of herbivores and smaller predators. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity and disrupted ecological balances established over millennia. While interbreeding is known among wolf-like canines, studies have found no evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for dire wolf extinction remain a subject of debate, with factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability likely playing a role. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, its formidable presence and powerful bite force captivate our imagination. In the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years, shaping ecosystems and adapting into a myriad of forms that continue to captivate our imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting characters stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. Enter the forest wrasses, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors and proving that nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it comes to apex predators. Roughly 53 million years ago in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place, a hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter or 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork, hardly the stuff of nightmares. But appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set Paleopsilopterus apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. Little did the other inhabitants of ancient South America know. I sometimes wonder if the mammals of early South America truly understood the avian dynasty that was rising around them. Could they have known they were witnessing the birth of a lineage that would reign for millions of years? Nature, it seemed, had grand plans for these terror birds, and those plans involved immense size. Just 3 million years after Paleopsilus took its first steps, Eleutherornis emerged, a terror bird 50% taller than its ancestor. But size wasn't its only advantage. It also expanded its range like no other terror bird, venturing across the sea to Europe. Fossil remains have been found in France and Switzerland, making it the only known member of its family to have lived outside the Americas. I can only imagine the surprise of early European mammals when this exotic predator appeared, bringing a taste of South American terror to the Old World. But Eleutherornis was just the beginning. As the epochs rolled by, the terror birds continued to grow, adapt, and diversify, almost in competition with themselves, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors in size and ferocity. The Oligocene epoch, from about 34 to 23 million years ago, marked a turning point. It was during this time that the family truly began to live up to its name, with the emergence of giants that would have given pause to even the bravest prey. Consider Paraphysornis, a Brazilian bird that stood 1.4 meters tall and weighed a whopping 180 kilograms. To put that into perspective, it outweighed the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This was no lightweight. Paraphysornis was built like a feathered tank, with robust bones that spoke of raw power. Paleontologists believe it hunted using a combination of kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak. It's a hunting style that might remind one of a prehistoric version of mixed martial arts. But Paraphysornis wasn't just a mindless brute. Like many of its terror bird kin, it likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart from other contemporary predators. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest that they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, indicating keen senses that would have made them formidable hunters. As impressive as Paraphysornis was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. As we step into the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, spanning from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, we encounter the true giants of the terror bird family, creatures that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. 3 names stand out in this pantheon of avian terrors: Titanus, Kelenken, and Brontornis. Each represents the pinnacle of the terror bird lineage, and each had its own claim to fame. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus had grander ambitions. It crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America during the Great American Interchange, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. Unlike most of its relatives, this bird lived in what is now the United States, including Texas, Florida, and California. Standing 2 meters tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. Imagine the shock of a Pleistocene horse or ground sloth accustomed to watching out for saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, suddenly confronted by this alien predator, half bird, half nightmare. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenken, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 3 meters tall and weighed around 250 kilograms. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Recent studies have shown that Kelenken and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that set them apart from their smaller relatives. Known as the terror bird skull type, this adaptation gave them increased bite force and pecking power, suggesting they may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought, potentially including some of the megafauna that roamed South America during their reign. The title of the largest terror bird is still hotly debated, with Brontornis giving Kelenken a run for its money. While slightly shorter at 2.8 meters, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 400 kilograms. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time, and the 4th heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Brontornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all, citing similarities in its toe claws to those of herbivorous birds. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. I imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird world. Imagine standing twice as tall as Usain Bolt, weighing several times as much, and still being able to outrun him. That was the reality for some terror birds. These weren't just big birds, they were finely tuned predators, built for speed and sensory awareness. They dominated South America for millions of years, and I've always wondered what it must have been like to witness their reign. While some giant terror birds relied on sheer size and power, many others evolved for speed. Studies of their leg bones reveal a structure much like modern ostriches. Short thigh bones with elongated lower leg and foot bones, a clear sign of high-speed running. Paleontologists estimate that some terror birds, including the larger Titanus, could reach speeds exceeding 30 mph, making them faster than the fastest human, despite their size. But speed wasn't just for chasing prey. For smaller and medium-sized terror birds, it was vital for defense. In a world teeming with giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, a quick escape could mean survival. This blend of speed and size made terror birds adaptable predators, capable of diverse hunting strategies. Smaller, faster species might have hunted swift prey like small mammals and reptiles, while the larger ones could have ambushed or even taken on larger, more dangerous animals. Beyond their size and beaks, the true power of terror birds lay in their highly developed senses. Studies of their skulls and brain cases reveal sensory capabilities far beyond many of their contemporaries. While their eyesight might not have been as sharp as eagles', it was well developed, providing excellent depth perception, crucial for any predator. What truly set their vision apart was its versatility. They were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and dim light, making them effective hunters around the clock. And their hearing was remarkable. The inner ear structure suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds, allowing them to detect the footsteps and movements of potential prey hidden by dense vegetation. I picture a terror bird standing motionless in a prehistoric forest, head cocked slightly. It might seem to be resting, but its incredibly sensitive ears are picking up the faintest rustle of leaves. In an instant, it can pinpoint its prey and launch into action. This combination of vision and hearing made terror birds complete predators, allowing them to dominate their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers faced their downfall, and the terror birds were no exception. For millions of years, these avian predators ruled South America, evolving into diverse species, filling various ecological niches. But eventually, their luck ran out. Traditionally, their extinction was linked to the Great American Interchange about 2.7 million years ago. The formation of the Isthmus of Panama created a land bridge between North and South America, leading to a significant exchange of animals. The common belief was that new predators from North America, like cats, dogs, and bears, outcompeted the terror birds. However, as is often the case, the truth is more complex. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate web of factors. One of the main challenges to the competition hypothesis comes from examining the fossil record. Most terror birds, along with many of their South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in significant numbers. This suggests that something else was at play. Furthermore, the success of Titanus in North America contradicts the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Titanus not only expanded its range northward, but also coexisted with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds could hold their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer likely involves a complex interplay of factors, with climate change playing a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have profoundly impacted the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open environments. I find myself often pondering the creatures that barely missed crossing paths with humanity. Consider the terror birds. For years, we thought they vanished about 1 million years ago. But recent fossil finds suggest some smaller species survived until a mere 96,000 years ago. Even more astonishing, there's a set of fossils, possibly from a new species, dated to just 18,000 years ago. If that's confirmed, terror birds lived almost until humans arrived in South America around 15,000 years ago. It makes me wonder, how close did we come to meeting these giants? What stories might have been told around the fire about them? Could they be the origin of the giant bird legends in South American folklore? Perhaps our ancestors heard tales of these creatures passed down through generations. After all, other megafauna like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths left their mark on human culture. It's humbling to realize that if terror birds had survived just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the world might be very different. Of course, the Tyrannosaurus rex also strikes terror into the heart of anyone who considers it. We've always regarded this dinosaur as the pinnacle of prehistoric might. But how terrifying was the T-Rex, really? In 1902, paleontologist Barnum Brown discovered the first known fragment of a T-Rex skeleton in Montana. Since then, major finds, like the virtually complete specimen Sioux in South Dakota, have given us invaluable information. Through careful excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction, researchers have pieced together the history of this giant predator, T-Rex, along with other large theropods like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus, belongs to the Tyrannosaurini subtribe within the Tyrannosauridae family. Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the last and most recognizable tyrannosaurid species, reigned as the top predator during the late Cretaceous period. The T-Rex was massive, its muscular body stretching up to 12 meters long, about the size of a school bus. Some paleontologists even speculate that certain specimens may have exceeded 13 meters. This giant stood roughly 6 meters tall at the hips. Estimates suggest a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons, its skin and flesh covering massive bones. That's about the weight of several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure. Its vertebral column consisted of neck, back, and sacral vertebrae. Its muscular S-shaped neck supported its massive head. The forelimbs were short, with 2 clawed fingers, contrasting its long hind limbs. Many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength, crucial for supporting its immense bulk. And the skulls? They could reach up to 1.54 meters in length. That's about the size of an adult human. The skulls of Tyrannosaurus rex featured large fenestrae, which I always found fascinating. These openings reduced weight while showcasing unique adaptations. An extremely wide rear, for example, and a narrow snout, ensuring exceptional binocular vision. These skulls, composed of massive yet fused bones with pneumatized components, contributed to the tyrannosaurid trend of a powerful bite, far surpassing that of non-tyrannosaurids. That upper jaw, with its U-shaped tip, allowed for the extraction of more tissue and bone with each bite, though, of course, it heightened stress on the front teeth. And those teeth! In the upper jaw, they exhibited prominent ridges and tips that curled backward like cutting tools, showing its distinct heterodonty. The remaining teeth, robust and spaced, resembled, well, lethal bananas. In mature individuals, the upper jaw housed larger teeth than the lower jaw, with the largest tooth discovered measuring a staggering 30.5 centimeters in length. I've often wondered about the purpose of the numerous small openings observed in both the upper and lower jaws. Potential sensory functions? Indications of external structures? The mystery deepens. Despite Tyrannosaurus rex's reputation for its massive jaws and teeth, I can't help but think about those disproportionately small arms. For years, we thought they were useless remains, but some now speculate they were deadly weapons used in hand-to-hand combat. Paleontologist Stephen Stanley proposes that these small limbs, only about 3 feet long, had crescent-shaped claws, sharpened to a razor edge, capable of causing deadly injuries to unsuspecting prey. I picture the moment when the T-Rex advances towards its target, its huge head hanging above, while its strong front limbs make rapid slashing movements, cutting through tissue and muscles with frightening accuracy. This paints a whole new picture of how the T-Rex hunted, showing its skill in quickly and effectively immobilizing its prey. Once thought to be useless structures like wisdom teeth in humans, the T-Rex's arms are now recognized as crucial weapons in its hunting tactics. The Jurassic Park movies often portrayed Tyrannosaurus Rex as having poor eyesight. Characters would evade its notice by remaining still, but recent scientific findings suggest otherwise. Paleontologists, drawing upon comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision like contemporary predators, like hawks, with the ability to detect both moving and stationary objects. This challenges its cinematic depiction and deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Another perspective suggests the T-Rex was an adept ambush predator, utilizing its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Conversely, some view it as a scavenger, feeding on carrion or scavenging from carcasses. These differing views underscore the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and ecological role, fueling ongoing debates among researchers. Along with its extraordinary eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus Rex possessed a remarkable sense of smell, akin to vultures today. This keen olfactory ability allowed it to spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. And in addition to its sharp senses, the T-Rex excelled at hunting due to its quick speed. Able to detect prey from a distance, it could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour, a pace comparable to the world record sprinting speed of Usain Bolt. The feeding and diet of the Tyrannosaurus Rex were integral to its dominance as a top predator during the late Cretaceous period. With its massive size and powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, T-Rex was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large, herbivorous dinosaurs, such as Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, which were among the toughest dinosaurs of their time and were preyed upon by T-Rex. Additionally, at times, T-Rex would also prey upon other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its fearsome predatory prowess. It's believed that T-Rex may have occasionally targeted individuals of its own kind or even formidable predators, demonstrating the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus Rex had a significant impact on its surroundings beyond its role as an efficient hunter. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses such as speed or armor to evade its attacks, while others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus Rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Dinosaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. Forget the horned helmets and storm-tossed seas you might imagine when you think of Vikings. I've been reading about something far more terrifying that they faced. Creatures so colossal and powerful, they seemed ripped from legend. These weren't just animals. They were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. Armed with iron blades and wooden shields, the Vikings didn't just conquer lands. They battled nature itself in clashes so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike anything alive today. Standing at a towering 1.8 meters or 6 feet at the shoulder, these weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh up to 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds, with a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What made aurochs truly intimidating were their enormous horns, curved weapons that could span up to 1 meter or 3.3 feet from tip to tip. These weren't defensive tools. They were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior or even flip a small boat. Archaeological evidence suggests that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 35 kilometers or 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. Many Norse graves contain evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs' populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting prey. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaktora forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the northern Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines. Colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 75 to 85 centimeters, or 2.5 to 2.8 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 35 kilometers, or 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on 2 legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land. Norse seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks, consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Elde, off Iceland, a sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skogelg, as I've seen it written, a creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species, standing up to 2.1 meters or 7 feet at the shoulder, with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 1.8 meters or 6 feet across. These forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations, unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting prez and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose with their uniformly dark coats, the Viking era, the forest elk, as we might call them today, were truly vital to Viking communities. I've read accounts where a single one of these massive deer could provide over 500 kilograms of meat. Imagine, over 1,100 pounds, enough to feed a small village for weeks during the brutal northern winters. Cave paintings suggest these animals had distinctive light patches, almost mottled, on their sides and shoulders. This would have given them excellent camouflage in the dappled forest light. And apparently, their behavior was more aggressive than modern moose, especially during the rutting season. The bulls would actively defend territories rather than simply competing for females. Their hides were tougher and more durable than domestic cattle leather prized for shields, boats, and winter clothing. And perhaps most valued of all were their enormous antlers, transformed by Viking craftsmen into everything from tools and weapons to drinking horns for isles and kings. By the late Viking Age, though, these distinctive forest elk populations were already showing signs of decline. Intensive hunting, coupled with the clearing of forests for agriculture, fragmented their habitat across Scandinavia. As Viking settlements expanded, encounters with these magnificent beasts became increasingly rare. Medieval sources describe them as creatures of the remote wilderness, rather than animals regularly seen near human habitation. But as impressive as these forest giants were, they weren't the only creatures shaping Viking survival. Deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers swam another unexpected powerhouse, one that proved just as valuable and equally dangerous: While spotting a whale today feels like a rare and wondrous sight, for Viking sailors, such encounters often turned into high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone, but hunting them meant rowing dangerously close, where a single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship and send its crew to a cold, watery grave. Unlike most whale species that still inhabit northern seas today, the Atlantic gray whale population was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. But during the Viking Age, these magnificent marine mammals were abundant, particularly in coastal waters, where their distinctive feeding behavior made them both visible and vulnerable. Atlantic gray whales reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, comparable to modern gray whales in the Pacific, and weighed up to 36 tons. That's roughly the size of a Viking longship, a comparison that wouldn't have been lost on Norse seafarers. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles and whale lice, gave them a distinctive appearance that featured in Norse daeons of sea creatures. What made gray whales unique among the cetaceans Vikings encountered was their feeding strategy. Unlike deep-diving species, gray whales were bottom feeders that plowed the sea floor for small invertebrates, creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This habit brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated most frequently. For Norse communities, gray whales represented an extraordinary bounty when successfully hunted. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the harsh northern winter. Archaeological evidence from coastal North settlements shows specialized bone tools designed specifically for processing whale meat, alongside huge cooking pits that could only have been used for creatures of this size. But the hunting of gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species such as the right whale, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense when threatened. They would often charge attacking boats, using their massive flukes to smash wooden vessels to splinters. Norse sagas contain accounts of whaling expeditions ending in disaster when cornered whales fought back, earning them the nickname devilfish among later whalers. What made Atlantic gray whales particularly vulnerable to hunting was their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Each year, they would travel along well-established routes between feeding areas in the north and calving grounds further south. Vikings, with their intimate knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points where the whales would be channeled through narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion in areas of heaviest Norse settlement. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate, females typically give birth to just one calf every 2 years, set the stage for their eventual disappearance from Atlantic waters. But while Vikings battled colossal whales at sea, their struggles didn't end once they reached dry land. For the forests of Britain were home to predators just as fierce and far less predictable. In the late 8th century, when Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme: the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years before Norse settlers arrived to carve out new kingdoms. standing taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan, but smaller than modern timber wolves. British wolves typically reached heights of 70 to 85 centimeters at the shoulder and weighed between 30 to 45 kilograms. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era Deons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland, with packs controlling territories from the Scottish Highlands. I find myself often wondering about the echoes of the past, the stories whispered by the bones of animals long gone. Consider the British wolf. Archaeological evidence from early Viking settlements reveals their bones, marked with the cuts of newcomers, suggesting that the Vikings quickly began hunting these predators. For these settlers, wolves were both a threat and an opportunity. Their attacks on livestock, especially sheep, made them enemies of the Norse economy. Yet, Viking warriors also respected their hunting prowess and pack coordination, qualities they themselves valued in battle. This complex relationship is still visible in Norse place names across former Viking territories in Britain. Locations like Olvadale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Norse settlers frequently encountered these predators. Viking-era runestones discovered in northern England depict wolf hunts, suggesting these pursuits held ceremonial significance for warriors establishing their prowess in new lands. British wolves even left their mark on Viking folklore. As Norse settlers integrated with local populations, they adopted and transformed Celtic wolf myths into their own traditions. The wolf warrior connection strengthened, with berserkers sometimes described wearing wolf pelts. But the fate of British wolves was sealed not by Vikings, but by their descendants. As Norse settlements transitioned into medieval kingdoms, systematic wolf extermination became policy. The process began during the Viking Age, but accelerated afterward. The last wolves in England were eliminated during the 15th century, and Scotland's final wolves hung on until the 17th century. Ireland's last wolf was reportedly killed in 1786, ending a lineage that had witnessed everything from the first Celtic settlers to the Viking invasions. Another animal the Vikings encountered seemed like a relic from a more primeval age, the Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons. These armored leviathans lurked beneath the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe. Largely unchanged for over 200 million years, these living fossils once dominated the waterways of Viking territories, but have since vanished from much of their historical range. The Baltic sturgeon reached truly massive proportions, with females growing up to 10 feet in length and weighing over 660 pounds. Their prehistoric appearance, with bony plates called scutes arranged in 5 rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them unmistakable among European fish species. Most distinctive was their elongated, armor-plated snout, with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfectly designed for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from river and sea floors. Their immense size made a single catch noteworthy enough to feature in regional sagas, with several Norse tales mentioning heroes who wrestled armored river dragons. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals specialized sturgeon spears with detachable heads designed to penetrate the fish's armored exterior, a testament to how important these catches were to Viking fishermen. Beyond their meat, sturgeons offered multiple valuable resources. Their swim bladders were processed into isinglass, used for clarifying beer and wine and making a powerful adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint ailments. Most prized was sturgeon roe, caviar, which became a delicacy reserved for jarls and kings. By the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already in decline in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, with females maturing at 15 to 20 years, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Predictable spawning runs and their habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes and pollution worsened their plight. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had grown so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, a protection that came too late to save them. But as Vikings turned their sights inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to shaggy titans of the forest. The European bison and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison familiar to us today, these European relatives were specifically adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 6.2 feet at the shoulder and weighing over 2,000 pounds, the European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps covered with shaggy dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their distinctive curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could navigate between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails, maintained over generations of use, became known to Vikings as bison roads, reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forest that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically— the European bison, a creature of immense power, could reach speeds of 40 kilometers an hour, even through dense woodland. I've read accounts of enraged bulls destroying entire hunting parties with a single charge. It's a chilling image, the hunter becoming the hunted. By the late Viking Age, their numbers were already dwindling across much of their former range. Intensive hunting and forest clearing for agriculture pushed these magnificent animals into increasingly isolated pockets. Unlike the aurochs, though, the European bison narrowly escaped complete extinction. A small population survived in the Białowieża forest between Poland and Belarus, where approximately 7,000 descendants live today. They are, in a way, the last direct link to the forest giants the Vikings once hunted. The world the Vikings knew was vanishing even as they sailed, hunted, and settled across northern Europe. The creatures that had defined their landscapes were already fading into memory, pushed to extinction by the same human expansion and climate changes that fueled the Viking Age itself. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? That the very forces that propelled their era also contributed to the loss of the world they knew.